Welcome, everyone, to the Improvly Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Dayna Gowan, and I'm so excited. I know I say this every time, but I'm so excited that you're here today because this is a special solo episode. And I know I say that every time I have a solo episode because all of the solo episodes are special because I don't do a ton of them. But this one is extra special because we are celebrating 50 episodes of the Improvly Speaking podcast. That is amazing. Oh my gosh. And if you're like, cool, whatever, that's fine. This is a selfishly solo episode, I guess, but I promise there will be takeaways and lessons learned for you too that you can apply to your life. Don't worry. I will make sure this is worth your while. I honestly can't believe that there have been 50 episodes, and technically, okay, when this episode comes out, I think it's the 52nd episode. Rona Lewis's episode is 51, and I think Jessely's was considered 50, including the jingle. So if you don't include the jingle, then Rona's is the 50th episode. I'm getting into very minute details here, and it doesn't matter. All that matters is that we have had 50 episodes of the Improvly Speaking podcast, and I can tell you that I honestly never thought I would see this number, 50. 50 episodes. So today, in this episode, I want to just take you back to how I started. I have an origin story episode that explains why I started the podcast, but I don't know if I go into all the details and behind the scenes of starting the podcast and like where my thoughts were. And I got to tell you, they were very negative. So I'll give you the behind the scenes of starting the podcast 3 years ago. I'll share with you my more than zero goal that I had when starting the podcast. And then we'll wrap up with just kind of talking about overcoming all the doubt and releasing all the judgments and expectations that come with doing all new things. Hence the title of this podcast, Releasing All the Judgments and Expectations. So let's jump into it. Quick backstory, and nothing is quick that I do, by the way. I'm going into this like, maybe this will be a 30-minute solo episode. We'll see what this turns into, because as you know, I am a talker. So here's the backstory of the podcast, and I'm recording this episode in early December 2025, and I released the podcast in November 2022. I think it was November 16th, to be official and very exact. November 16th, 2022 is when the podcast came out. So the Improvly Speaking podcast has been out now for 3 years, which is amazing. Now, I've had some hiatuses. I had my maternity leave when I had my baby girl back in June 2024, and that lasted a while. That was a good 7 or 8 month chunk of a hiatus. And then I had a smaller hiatus when we moved from California to North Carolina. And you know what? That happens. So really, I guess I've had the podcast for like 2 years and 2 months. If you count all the hiatuses, that doesn't matter. We don't count that. We say we've had the podcast for 3 years. And really, that happens. Life gets in the way, or life comes up, things come up. And I think it's totally natural to take a hiatus. And what I'm really proud of is that the hiatus didn't turn into a permanent, the podcast is done. It was a hiatus and I got back into it. And if I've overcome those 2 hiatuses of having a child, and I came back from that, and moving across the country, and we came back from that, I think we can just keep this podcast going forever. I mean, really, like, we can overcome anything. And honestly, I love recording. I love this work. I love getting to talk with amazing people. And so there are no plans to hang it up anytime soon. Woo. Okay, back to the story. Podcast launched in November 2022. However, I decided to start and launch the podcast in July 2022. Now, before that, I had a podcast with a colleague, Gabe Zickerman, and our podcast was called The AHA Method: Public Speaking in a Time of Distraction. And the dynamic of that podcast was Gabe was a very professional speaker. He had done several TED Talks, like, not just TEDx Talks, like, I think, like, really big TED Talks. I haven't fact checked that, but I believe that's the case. He had traveled all around the world doing speaking gigs and keynotes, and I was a newbie speaker in the sense of, starting my professional speaking career. I was still building my business. I started my business in July 2022 as well. And so I was kind of learning from him. And when we had our calls to talk about his business, and I was working with him to help promote his public speaking course on Udemy, Udemy. I always said it wrong. But he had an online course, and I was helping him to promote it. And when we had our calls and conversations, we would get into these really good discussions on public speaking. And he was like, "You know what? We should record these. We should start a podcast." I had no ambitions of starting a podcast before that. That was not even on my radar. I'm not sure what was, but it wasn't having a podcast. But it was the pandemic. I was home a lot. There were things to do, but there was time to do other things. And so I said yes to it. I was really scared. I was very nervous, had a lot of doubt and judgments. But Gabe had a podcast before. He knew how to run it, and he kind of took the reins and started everything, got the wheels in motion. And before I knew it, we had 3 episodes up online. We used Spotify as our host, and we recorded 3 episodes, and they were up very quickly. And thank goodness that Gabe handled that piece of it, because if I were responsible for the edits and releasing the episodes, they would have never been put out there. I had so many edits I wanted to make. I would listen to the episode. I'm like, "Oh my God, I said that. That could be mildly offensive to some people. Like, we should probably take that out." And Gabe was like, "It's okay. You were given some grace when you're recording. Like, it's fine. It is not bad. Like, nothing that you said was actually offensive. You're just very in your head." And I was super, super duper in my head doing these episodes. And I gotta say, probably the first 3 were tough. I don't know, rough. I'd have to go back and listen to them. They're probably not as bad as I think, but they're not my best work. And I mean, when you're starting something new, the first few times you do things are rough, and you just have to get through the cringe. I have an episode on that I did early on about getting through the cringe. And I think my goal was to do 3 solo episodes so I could get through the cringe of doing solo episodes. I still love guest episodes more, and I think my personality is just going to like guest episodes more. But when something comes up, I will record the solo episodes. So I'm not going to put a ton of pressure on myself to be in a rhythm of, okay, 2 guest episodes and a solo episode. That doesn't feel authentic to me. So how I've been rolling is whenever I'm called and have something really good and juicy to talk about, I will do a solo episode. So anyway, had the podcast with Gabe, we got it up and running, really excited about it, and I think we had the podcast for about a year and a half. I'd have to go on Spotify and check, but it was about a year and a half, and we released at least 20 episodes, maybe a little over 20, and they were a mixture of episodes with just us 2 and then a few guest episodes too. People who I knew, who I invited on, and then some of Gabe's guests as well. And it was so much fun. It was a blast. I was having a total blast. However, as we got rolling, I was starting to put more work into it, and I was finding more of the guests. And at that point, I had taken over doing the edits, aka working with the editor to do the edits. And then I was releasing the episode, and I was doing the social media part of it. And it was a lot. and I enjoyed doing it, but as I was finding guests, I started to have the feeling of like, "Oh, I would love to invite this improviser on, but there's not really a public speaking connection to it." Like, they do speaking, but we would really have more of an improv-focused conversation, and it didn't relate to the podcast. Also, I was starting up my business, and I was like, I'm doing all this work. I would love to have a resource and an output with my business name on it. So I just kept feeling this pull to do my own podcast. Like I was feeling this tug, and I would talk to my friend Susan Bartley, who I've had on the podcast twice now. I would talk to her all the time about going solo and starting my own podcast. She was very supportive. She was like, "Go for it. You'll be great." She was definitely my hype person and cheerleader in the corner cheering me on. But it took a while. It was probably a good 6 months that I was feeling this. And again, there was nothing dramatic. I enjoyed the podcast with Gabe. And honestly, we could have kept it going for another year or 2 or more. Like it would have kept rolling because I had the energy and the passion for it. But I also had this pull and passion on the side of like, I wanna start my own, and I did not have the bandwidth to do 2. It's like, I can be on 2, but I cannot do the edits and all the releases for 2 of them. So I finally mustered up the courage, like, gathered up all the courage to talk with Gabe. We had one of our weekly or biweekly meetings, and I told him how I was feeling and what I was thinking, and he was so supportive. He totally understood the need for having my own kind of business name on something, like what I was feeling. He was like, "Go for it. You will be great." Again, just super supportive. And we kind of ended on, let's keep the podcast going. We have a few episodes in the vault, as I like to say. So let's release those and we can kind of record here and there when something comes up. So we didn't really like close it. We just kind of left it open ended. However, we never picked it back up again after that because I got really busy with the podcast. But nothing dramatic. We still stay in touch and we still chat here and there. So there's definitely no drama to it. All support and love. And honestly, so much gratitude to Gabe for just getting me started, putting podcasting on my radar because, again, it was not on my radar before this. So I have that talk with Gabe early July 2022. I remember that night I was taking a sketch class with Improv for the People, and the sketch class was like 4 or 5 classes where we worked on our sketch material, like writing different scripts for sketches, and then we had a dress rehearsal class, and then we had an actual performance where we invited people to attend and watch the sketch show. And I don't think we were doing the rehearsal at that point, but we had a sketch class working on kind of finalizing our scripts for the rehearsal the next week. And so I just had that talk with Gabe. I like really finalized, put it out there in the universe that I'm going to start my podcast. And then I went to my class and I was just on cloud 9. I was feeling so good. That class went so good. I was like, there are just so many possibilities ahead. And I was just on this emotional high, just like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be so much fun. Like, I'm making it happen. I wanted to do this and I'm doing it. And just like all the feelings, I texted my friend Susan, like, I'm doing it. I'm in. And it felt amazing. It felt so good. And then the next morning, I woke up and it just seemed like all of the doubt and fear crept in while I slept. And I felt like I did a complete 180. I woke up and I thought, "Oh my God, what have I done? What have I done?" I had a good thing going. Like, Gabe was paying for everything. He was paying the editor for the edits. He started this, he handled it. Like, he has the following. I started to get really in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, probably all of our listeners are his followers because he has the following. I have no following. I started thinking, like, what do I know about hosting my own podcast? Like, who am I to have a podcast? Who am I to talk about improv? I'm not any kind of improviser. I'm a newbie improviser. I'm a up and coming speaker. Like, I'm not known in any circles. I have no following. I think at that point I didn't even have an Instagram. Like, I really spiraled out of control and really started to doubt myself, really started to judge, and I started to go into analysis paralysis too. I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, we have these processes in place for the current podcast, but there were some changes I wanted to make." And I was like, "Oh, I want to explore, the podcast hosting site. Like, do I want to use Spotify? Do I want to use something else?" I did a ton of research on the hosting site, and I couldn't make a decision too. I had so much paralysis analysis, it was crazy. And then, oh my gosh, the podcast cover art, that took, like, months to decide on. I had a friend do some, and then eventually I did, like, a vote on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, and had friends vote on the ones they liked. And it's so funny because the current podcast art, the pink background with me in the corner, that was, like, my least favorite. I didn't like that one, but I put it on there for the vote just to have, like, more options, and that one got the most, and people were saying it's the simplest. Like, it stands out because it's simple. It kinda generates interest because of the simplicity. Then I had more paralysis analysis because I was like, "Well, I really like this one," where if you're listening, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm, like, looking up and I have my hands up, and I had one that I really liked like that, but I ended up going with the pink one with me in the corner, the simple one, and I'm glad I did. I really like that cover art now, but again, like, oh my gosh, just the emotions that came with the heavy decisions of making and starting this podcast were unreal. And they were unreal because I had so much doubt and fear behind them too. I'm, like, taking a sigh because all these emotions are coming back, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it was so much." Also, I was doing a ton of research on just how to start up the podcast and be organized, and I took some classes. I joined the Buzzsprout Facebook group. I really did some research here to help with the startup. And with all of those emotions and doubts and fears and judgments that came up, what really helped me was to just keep going. I emailed my friends who I wanted to have on as guests. I asked them to come on. I gave them options for us to record, and I recorded a bunch. I think I recorded like 3 or 4 guest episodes, and by doing that, I solidified that this is happening, which is so funny that, like, I had to kind of use my guests as leverage to start the podcast, but because I used up their time and I knew they were good episodes, I was like, "We have to release this. I have to put this out there. I can't hold on to these. I can't not release them. These are good episodes. They need to be put out there." And so that's what helped. That is honestly why it's here. Also, another thing that helped is I went to Camp Improv Utopia, and I did the deconstruction class at Camp Yosemite in September 2022. Brian James O'Connell was the instructor for that course, and he was just so inspiring that weekend because I had some of these episodes recorded. That was September 2022, and I hadn't released yet. I was planning for November, still having all of those doubts and worries. And then once I went to camp, I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing this." BOC is so inspiring. He's been on the podcast too. I've also talked about that experience in taking the leap solo episode. So he is one of the reasons also why I launched, and I'm so grateful too. Now flashing forward to launch time, November 2022, I released the podcast. The first episode was with my great improv friend, Victoria Kennitzer, and it was so much fun. We talked about her improv and public speaking journey, and I had a solo episode out after that. I'm kind of looking at my episode list here, and then I had an episode with my best friend, Rebecca Klaskala, who's a chef. And when I released these episodes, I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of had a more than zero mentality to it. I was like, as long as these episodes get more than 0 listens and downloads, then I'm good. Like, if an episode had a big old goose egg or a big old 0 next to it, like, nobody clicked on it and nobody listened to it, then I would have been absolutely heartbroken. But I never had that. I never had any zeros for the episode downloads. I always had more than 0, and, like, surprisingly more than 0, not just, like, 1 or 2. It would always be, like, 30, like, quickly. And I remember just being surprised by that. I was like, "Well, I'll put this out there and probably my parents will listen to it, and I don't know who else." And funny enough, I don't think my parents listen to the episodes. One, because I've said things that are not controversial or anything like that, but I have said things that hint at, like, "Parents, if you're listening, let me know," and they've never let me know. Also, they think that watching the reels on Facebook are the episode. Like, I don't know if they know that there's a full hour and a half, 2-hour episode attached to that reel. So, I don't think they listen. So, they're not even in those numbers. Anyway, the more than 0 perspective really helped me, and side note and side tangent, I took a stand-up class, I think it was, like, May or June 2023 with Solange Castro, who is amazing, and that was one of my big jokes in my class show was more than 0, and just talking about, like, why don't we have a more than 0 approach to life? Like, I did 10 minutes of exercise today, more than 0. I slept 6 hours today, more than 0, which honestly is key right now as a mom. I'm like, "All right, I got 6 hours of sleep. That's really good." Anything more than 4 hours of sleep, I'm like, "All right, that's decent," right now as a mom. And also, I was productive at work for 2 hours today, more than 0. So, I had a whole more than 0 bit going, and I actually still believe that, like, we need to have a very gentle, more than 0 approach to life. Because if we do more than 0, that is enough, and I stand by that. And here's the thing about releasing expectations. I didn't know what to expect, and I've been pleasantly surprised with the numbers. And so, let's see, I was just looking on my Instagram posts to see kind of when I posted the milestones, but I reached 100 podcast downloads by November 28th, 2022. So, less than 2 weeks after I released, I reached 100 podcast downloads, which again is not much, but also exciting. Thanks, Buzzsprout, for those little milestones. That was great. Definitely more than 0, right? 100 within the first month of launching? Awesome. More than 0. And then I posted on July 15th, 2023, the podcast hit 1,000 downloads. So less than a year after releasing and launching the podcast, we hit 1,000 downloads. And I know from doing the first podcast, the AHA Method podcast, I don't think we ever hit 1,000 downloads. I think we were at like 600 or 800, and that was with like a year and a half of going at it and 20 episodes. So when I started to see the numbers, and again, they're modest numbers, Joe Rogan and Brene Brown and like all these amazing podcasters, they're getting millions of downloads, right? But they have the followings. So I have to put it into perspective that like I'm happy with more than 0. And people are listening and people are clicking on it. And that also answered the question and the doubt that I had of, well, what if everyone who listened on the first podcast were all Gabe's followers? And maybe they were, but now I've created something with my own following, and I didn't need to rely on somebody else to do it. I could do it on my own, which was the really exciting part. And that really showed me that I can do this. It's okay to put myself out there, and amazing things can come up if I try. Currently, as I'm recording this episode, I'm at 4,860 downloads all time. So if you round up, which we're going to, I'm at 5,000 downloads all time after 3 years of doing this. Now again, you could go, that's 3 years. That's pretty modest numbers. And sometimes I say that, and then I'm like, compared to what? Modest numbers compared to what? If I didn't do this, what would I be doing that would generate 5,000 downloads all time? What would I be doing that would have more downloads? Like, the podcast is my outlet, and it gives me so much great content to put out there, and content that I would never think of, but, like, having amazing guests who say great stuff, like, I get to use that and put that out there and share with people. So, anytime I question, like, "Well, I guess it's modest, I don't really know," I go, "Compared to what?" Comparison is the thief of joy. Judgment and comparison are the thieves of joy. Anytime I judge those numbers and like, I don't know, I have to remind myself it's more than zero and it's amazing. Like, I'm creating something and it's going to be slow and it's going to be fun. I remember I had Will Hines on as a guest, and he's been the most downloaded, most listened to episode I've had so far. And Will's had a ton of podcasts that he currently does or has done, and I remember him saying something of, "Yeah, I had some podcasts with friends, and we were getting, like, 3,000 downloads an episode, which is fine, but it just wasn't worth doing." And in my head, I'm like, "Mm." So, I guess that's where that comparison number comes in. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." But again, Will has been doing improv for decades. He's an amazing instructor. He has his own improv school now. So, of course, he has that following to get more downloads. So, yes, by Will's standards, my podcast is not worth doing for him. But for me, it is worth doing because it's not about the numbers. It's not about the data. I don't have a marketing background. I never studied marketing in school, hence my struggle of social media and other things marketing. But I do have an understanding that numbers are data and data informs decisions. However, my emotions and feelings also inform my decisions and behaviors. And if I can keep my emotions high and positive, I am more likely to believe in myself and to participate in things and put myself out there than I normally would. And so I see these numbers and I hear what Will said, and I understand that like maybe they're modest to you or somebody else, but you know what? They're amazing to me. So I'm releasing all of those judgments and expectations that mostly I hold for myself. And I'm just celebrating this awesome milestone of 50 episodes, 50 episodes. And I'm going to bask in this for a while. It's incredible. I never thought we would get here, and honestly, I was so surprised when we got here. I was like, "Really? We're at 50? That's amazing." I did a count before this, and I have 7 solo episodes that I've done. So this will be the 8th solo episode. So I've had on 41 guests. I've had on 2 guests who did a part 2. I've had on 41 guests who have given their time and their knowledge and shown up, and I truly believe that all of the episodes I've put out there have been amazing. There have been no flops. They have been all slays, as Madeline Chalk says in her episode. They honestly have been all slays. And to put out 50 slay episodes that just crush, at least the guest episodes. The solo ones I get in my head. But honestly, I do like the content I talk about. So backtrack, disregard that little judgment there of myself, the little criticism. All 50 episodes have been slays. They've been long. I do have long content, and I'm okay with that because I go off of feel and energy. And once I start to notice that the energy dips, that's when I start to wrap it up. But honestly, the energy sometimes doesn't dip until like 2 hours into the episode. So we just keep rolling until we don't. So here's where I turn it over to you and ask you, are you currently launching something or thinking of launching something that you're scared of doing, that you have a lot of doubt over? Are you in your head about it? Are you nervous about the numbers or the data or what people will think when you put it out there? And I'm here to cheer you on and tell you to go for it. Release the expectations, release the judgments you have, and just go for it. You will never know what those numbers could be, what the possibilities are, unless you go for it, unless you try. And if it's a flop, if you do get a big goose egg of 0, which honestly, if you watch your episode or listen or do whatever, then that's 1 there. So that's a way to cheat the more than 0 system. If you do get a goose egg in whatever way, shape, or form, you can reevaluate. But until then, you don't know until you try. I'm super pumped. 50 episodes in, no sign of slowing down. The next milestone on Buzzsprout is 75 episodes. So we got our sights on 75, and then after that, 100. And I've already recorded a bunch. Like, I'm not even like batch recording per se, but I just have so many people I want to talk to, and I have the time now. So I've already got like at least 5 or 6 episodes recorded after this for the new year. Let's rock and roll. Let's do this. Let's keep going. I do want to give a shout out, and this is selfish, I know, to read out 41 guest names, but I think it's really important because these people came on the show, they gave their time, and they gave really great episodes. And so I want to shout out the 41 guests who have really supported the podcast by being on it. And all of them were great episodes. So go back and listen to all of them. You can take your time. It'll take a while. But go back and revisit them because they've all been great. So shout out to Victoria Kennitzer, Chef Rebecca Klaskala, Jim Young, Madeline Chalk, Nick Armstrong, Susan Wagner, Dr. Raquel Garzon, Sunny Mayo, Dr. Michael Smith, Susan Bartley, who came on twice, Pam Victor, Carolyn Martin, Jesse Greenfield, who's also come on twice, Dr. Carrie Graham, Will Hines, Eric Escalante, Don Colliver, BJ Lang, Chantel Soleil, aka the Jingle Lady, who also created this amazing jingle that I'm never getting rid of because it's so perfect and it will forever be the jingle of this podcast. Fernando Funes, Joe Van Hackey, who we might have on a second time to revisit and check in with him, Ashley Ward, Neil Curran, who was our first international guest from Ireland, Ramona J. Smith, Dr. Jana Hirsch, Dr. J. Maddock, Chris Bogue, Paula Dirks, Amanda Bonar, Brian James O'Connell, aka BOC, Ferran Luengo, another international guest from Spain, and I think he's in London or the UK now, Dr. Bob Swope, Susan Murphy, Tony DeRosa, Selma Solomon, Matthew Kreckler, Jessica Hallam, Jackie Arend, Brian LaFontaine. These are our newer guests. Jessalee Windhouse, and Rona Lewis, and many more to come. I love that list of guests. All of those episodes were special and are special to me. I've listened to them multiple times and having to do the edits for them or send the edits to the editor. And speaking of, I would love to do a shout out to the editing team, Studio Pizza Productions. Scott Cornick is my BFF. He probably doesn't consider me a BFF, but I feel like we chat a lot all the time on Slack, and that makes us BFFs. I also want to give a shout out to my virtual assistant, Orticia Gitti from Fortune Assist. She is amazing and helps me with the social media content. And last, and most importantly, I want to give a shout out to you for listening. If this is your first time listening, thank you. If this is your 50th episode listening, thank you. Big shout out to Ferran Luengo, who I think has listened to all or almost all of the episodes. Hopefully he hears this. And again, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this journey. It really has been fun. It's been amazing. And here's to 50 more. Let's do this. Let's rock it. I'm excited for you and your journey ahead. Whatever you're thinking about launching and doing, go for it. Do your thing. Let me know what it is. If you need numbers, I'll be your more than zero. And also, you don't need that help, but I would gladly be a part of your more than zero to support you and also to listen and support what you're doing. Let me know what you're going for. Release all the doubts. It's normal to be nervous. It's normal to be scared, to go out of your comfort zone. Do it anyway, because you just might be surprised of all of the discoveries and possibilities that come up. I would love to hear from you and celebrate with you. Please reach out to me and let me know that you're listening and let me know what you're working on. You can email me at Dayna@improvlyspeaking. That's DAYNA @improvly. That's improvly speaking.com. On Instagram, I'm @improvlyspeaking. And on LinkedIn, I'm @Dayna Gowan. Special celebration episode. We'll do it again at 100, and I will read out every single guest name. Don't you worry, I'm going to do it again because that's important to me. And also, a special announcement. This is my first solo episode that I have recorded and put on YouTube. The other solo episodes are out there, but they're all blank. The video's blank because I didn't record the video. I have recorded this video because why not? So that you don't have a blank screen on YouTube. So if you like YouTube for podcasts, we're on it now. That's a new milestone too of just putting the videos on YouTube. So feel free to check those out as well if you prefer that podcasting outlet. All right. We'll wrap up here because I do have to go do daycare pickup, go pick up my sweet little baby, Evie. Thank you again for listening and supporting Improvly Speaking. Say yes and go out and flex your creative thinking. I'll talk to you next time.